So he's the head of scholarly communications. Todd came in 2010 to EIU. Not coincidentally, the KEEP, our institutional repository, started that same year, and he has nurtured it all the way. And it's been a pleasure to see him in his community here. It now has over 100,000 items and 8 million downloads. So what we're going to talk to you about, some concepts that I bring from my experience with digital collection building, and then Todd's going to show you how that's done. Okay. So we're going to talk about how we're creating a liberatory archive, and I'll explain what that means. And it's an archive of student experiences at EIU. And it's an initiative grounded in challenging historical systems of exclusion and reimagining how we can preserve and share stories. This work's made possible not only by Todd, but the evolving socio-technical infrastructure, and Digital Commons is at the center of that. It's also shaped by an understanding of the role of libraries and our complex legacy and how we've been entangled in the practices of colonialism. So colonialism, as many of you would know, is defined as control by one power over a dependent area or people. Libraries and museums, even well-intentioned, became instruments of dominance, shaping knowledge in ways that privilege certain narratives while erasing and misrepresenting others. This has occurred internationally, but also within societies. Bureaucratic record-keeping, rigid classification systems, and the extraction of cultural materials often served imperial powers, asserting authority over indigenous and marginalized communities. Cataloging practices reinforced racial hierarchies. Access to cultural heritage was often limited to credentialed researchers, denying local and descendant communities control over their own histories. In response to this legacy, a global movement emerged to decolonize archives, repatriating materials, empowering community governance, and reimagining the roles of libraries and archivists. A post-custodial model of archival stewardship emphasizes community control over heritage materials. Liberatory librarianship, which is a newer term, is grounded in this work, and it seeks to dismantle oppressive systems with libraries and archives building structures centered on community agency and partnerships. This shift from colonial control to liberatory practice calls on librarians and archivists and digital collection builders and others to expand whose voices are preserved and to redefine who makes decisions about historical memory. This reflects a broader movement within higher education and librarianship to embed social justice, participative governance, and community engagement. And so, what does this have to do with the archive we're building? Well, looking back, university yearbooks, student newspapers, much like colonialized archival collections, reinforce dominant power structures by privileging the visibility and voices of majority groups while marginalizing others and reflecting broader societal exclusions. These decisions may have been the result of intentional policies or ignorance or unconscious bias. At many predominantly white institutions, Black students and other students of color were omitted entirely from early yearbooks. Historically, Black fraternities and sororities were often absent or minimally acknowledged despite leadership in their roles on campus. Women's achievements were sometimes confined to social or beauty categories. Women's scholarly and professional contributions were underrepresented for many years. Working class and first-generation students were less likely to be highlighted, reflecting how clubs, honor societies, and leadership roles often favored students of greater financial means and access. Students with disabilities were generally absent from visual or narrative records, reinforcing a false image. LGBTQ plus students were largely erased from formal publications until recently, even when networks, advocacy, and communities existed on their campuses. Although international students have been present since the start of higher education in the United States, their academic, cultural, and leadership contributions were often overlooked or reduced to token appearances. Students who did not fit the traditional 18 to 22-year-old residential undergraduate model were frequently invisible. Campus media overlooked people like commuter students, student parents, evening learners, and veterans. Christian student organizations often received broad coverage, while other faith-based groups were less likely to be recognized or meaningfully documented. Further, civil rights protests, feminist organizing, LGBTQ plus advocacy, anti-war activism, labor movements, social justice protests were often subjected to selective storytelling. We can take pride in the progress made to reduce some of the most glaring exclusions, but it's important to recognize that marginalization persists, often in more subtle and systematic forms, almost certainly in ways we will only fully recognize in hindsight. So, as we all know, in a digital-first, digital-only environment, the records of campus life are no longer being created in the same way. Analog materials are declining. Yearbooks are being discontinued, and student newspaper editions are being eliminated. As a result, traditional archival records will not be available in the future. To preserve student and campus community experiences, the KEEP, EIU's IR, is supporting digital collection building using the institutional repository's functionality to collect and archive current student life, events, and activities. And we're doing this with a mindfulness of how archives have historically been created. The name of this new digital archive is Panther Tracks, and I can credit Todd with coming up with that, just like I understand you came up with the name of the keep. Oh, okay. Well, I'm going to credit, if you like it, it was mine. If you don't, it was Todd. If it was too obvious, it was almost certainly mine. When members of the EIU community themselves contribute, whether through photos, videos, flyers, meeting notes, social media posts, newsletters, web content, or oral histories, they help future students, researchers, and alumni gain insights into EIU. Panther Tracks Archives provides a unique opportunity for students to help build a more diverse and inclusive record of student life at EIU than would have previously been possible. The Panther Tracks Archives initiative directly embodies the principles of liberatory librarianship by shifting the creation of the historical record from institutional gatekeeping to students and community-driven participation. Where yearbooks and student newspapers sometimes mirrored exclusionary practices, this archive challenges these dynamics. Students are empowered to contribute their own materials, ensuring authentic self-preservation storytelling. It invites participation from students of historically marginalized backgrounds and organizations, helping to create a more inclusive and accurate narrative of campus life. Contributors are not merely subjects of documentation, they are co-creators, exercising meaningful control. While current efforts focus on documenting today's students and their experiences, Panther Tracks aspires to engage alumni. And by inviting alumni to contribute scans and other digital formats, artifacts, oral histories, by doing this, the project will seek to reclaim missing voices that were omitted in earlier decades. This is going to be a lot harder because we're dealing largely with analog materials, but that's our goal. In summary, Panther Tracks does not just preserve the history of EIU student life at a time when traditional records are disappearing, it redefines who gets to author that history and fosters a living, inclusive, community-owned archive. Okay, so that's the conceptual part. Now I'll turn it over to the practical person who's making this actually happen.
Thank you. So this counter down here is pretty wild because for the longest time it was on 20 minutes. And I was going to joke with Brian like, you were amazing, man. You just got done in like 1 minute. So I'm talking about, as Brian mentioned, kind of like he was the why, I am the how, right? And this is a project in process. I want to put that out there already. I'm just telling you kind of the directions we're going in. We're starting this out, so you may see me again next year where I'm giving you a follow-up on how this is all working out. So this is, as Brian was saying, this is kind of our ideals going in, is this liberatory librarianship model where we want to give voice to people who haven't really had voices. We want to give agency to people who haven't really had agency. And then these are the reasons why I'm selling this to the students. So there's kind of like two parts of it. And one is what I call the social media vaporware. So essentially here, these are all the reasons why you don't want to just rely on putting up your RSO pictures onto Instagram or Facebook or what have you. I had my own experience where I had a desktop computer that was hard crashing several times. And my partner and I are cheap, and we didn't replace it until it hard crashed for the final time, and we couldn't bring it back. So we had like years and years and years of pictures and everything that was just gone. Now, a lot of that had been shared on Facebook. Have you ever tried to go back and find your photos from Facebook from like 8 years ago or something? It is a nightmare, if it, So you're dealing with hardware crashes, unreliable platforms like MySpace. Who even uses MySpace anymore? What the heck happened to Twitter? So. And so you kind of, these are two things that I tell the students when I talk to them. I also talk about these things that maybe they're not totally really aware of. And one is non-existent metadata. So as we all know, the better metadata there is, the more likely you're going to find it. And if you put a picture up on Facebook versus putting your RSO pictures in the Keep, where we are applying all this metadata of who's in this photo, what's the RSO, what year is it. So in the future, when that person, John Smith or Jane Doe, goes to Google, like I was on the swim team at EIU back in 2025, they're going to be able to find it because it's in the Keep. So non-existent metadata is something that I've been educating students about. Like we will get that in the Keep. You don't have that on social media. Okay. Data plundering. As we all know, those nifty little things we sign off on when we say, yes, I'll use Instagram and I'm going to check that I agree to everything you're telling me to agree to. That includes selling all of our data, right? Because we are the products, right? So what I like to tell my students as well is any photos you put up on Facebook or Instagram, you are their product. They are selling this stuff. They're even, in fact, sometimes claiming it, like they claim copyright over it. Whereas in the Keep, you keep the intellectual property. It is your photo. It is preserved. We're not selling your data, right? So that's another way to sell it. Intellectual property protection. This is something that's been very important for some of our student groups because if they put stuff in the Keep, they can apply Creative Commons licenses to protect their intellectual property. So that's one part of my selling pitch. The other part, Brian already alluded to, which is that all of this that used to be an analog is no longer an analog. So we have a real concern that our campus life these days is essentially disappearing. It's not being preserved in the analog yearbook that we used to have because we no longer have it. It's not being preserved necessarily in the newspaper because that also is no longer analog. So we're concerned that somebody's going to be like, the swim team had a great year, what have you. It's up on social media. Where does that eventually go? So all of this is being affected. Even university archives are being affected. Like so much stuff is produced digitally now that Brian and I think in the future, the archives are going to be digital archives, right? So I bring all of this to the students. I went to the student senate, basically, and talked to them. I explained this initiative, Panther Tracks. So we're approaching this a couple different ways. We're trying to make it easy for students to submit things. So I'm going to talk about three things. One down here, sorry, moving away for a second, sorry. One down here is a student scholar selfies, a QR code. This is to encourage students to get in the habit of submitting. And the idea here is we're saying if you're in a lab or you're painting or something or doing research, take a quick selfie of yourself, scan the QR code, upload it to the Keep, just to get them in the habit. The second piece is a direct upload as an individual student. and that is happening under authors here, submit content. When they click the submit content, they go to a page, big blue button that says submit your content here. The challenge I have found is that it really depends, is it an image or is it something else? Because I have to differentiate those things, because as you all know, digital commons image galleries are treated differently, right? So the third piece, and the piece that I think has been the most successful so far, is to actually create structures in the Keep based on student organizations. So I went to the student government and I said, look, you're in a fraternity, you're in a sorority, I'll create space for you in the Keep. You go to that page, here's the URL, and you click the submit content, you can add stuff directly. That gives them some structure, it gives them a place to go, whereas this broad submit content ends up being filtered. Over here on the right, I just want to mention, this is a postcard that Brian's office produced for me to help promote this. I took this to student government, they loved it. All right, so hopefully that gives you an idea of the 3 different ways I'm kind of approaching this. But then you might wonder, okay, well then, how's this working out? I have some great testimonials. So I'm gonna take this mic, because if you'll indulge me, I want to read these because they're actually great. So this is Mason Tegeler. He is the president of Sigma Phi Epsilon fraternity. Please indulge me here. When I first learned about Panther Tracks, I saw it as a new way to record events, meetings, and memories. Now I see it as so much more, a platform to hold the stories of students like me and a place to leave behind a legacy that says, we were here. Now, I didn't coach him, okay? I simply said, Mason, would you give me a quote? Because you really like this, would you give me a quote? That's the quote he gave me. And I was like, this is a future politician, right? Because this is amazing. And that's a screenshot of their collection in the Keep. So he is so excited about this, he wants me to come to the Panhellenic Council in the fall and get the other fraternities and sororities on board with this. So that's a great start. All right, this is Ty Ria. Ty is president of the Creative Writing Club. As the president of the club, one of the things we have to worry about is the future of the club. With Panther Tracks, we were able to not only let others know what our members are writing about, but also protect our authorship rights. With the Keep, we can confidently say there's no harm in publishing the creative work. It will only get them one step closer to getting to the place they want to be. This group was really excited about the Creative Commons licensing and protecting intellectual property right. There's a screenshot up there, and they have multiple collections of essays, short stories, just all kinds of stuff. My last testimonial, Madison Veach, student government speaker. There are tons of benefits to the Panther Tracks initiative. It helps registered student organizations keep records. And for student government, we've been able to convert decades of files and free up tons of space in our student center, which was much needed. That screenshot is just one shelf of going back to the 1950s of student government binders that we are now in the process of digitizing. That came out of their student offices. They opened up so much space and they are thrilled with us. So I keep reminding them, you are going to be future alumni, remember this moment. So, okay. I think we're like 1 minute over. So, all right, thank you. We're happy to take any questions.